Okay, for today we are looking at adding and subtracting complex numbers, meaning we're adding and subtracting all of the values that have I with them. It makes them a complex number just by having I. So first thing we're looking at is adding and subtracting. Thinking of like terms, I is kind of like a variable. So the way you would treat it if it was like the first one, -5 plus 8x, you would treat that the same as -5 plus 8i. I is like a variable, acts just like an x does in this case. All right, so the first problem, what throws students normally is that there are parentheses around each quantity. In this case, since there is a plus sign in between, the parentheses really don't make a difference. Okay, if there's a minus, it makes a difference. We'll look at in just a little bit. A plus sign, parentheses don't really matter. A lot of students see parentheses and automatically start multiplying. You only multiply when there is no symbol in between. But since we have a plus sign in between, we are just collecting our like terms. So we have -5 plus 6, which is a +1, and then 8i minus 4i is a +4i. And that is it. We are finished. Okay, so the next problem also has a plus sign, which means we are just adding our like terms. So again, do not get yourself in the habit of seeing parentheses and think multiply. You have to look and see what is in between the two sets of parentheses. So looking here, again, it's a plus, so we're just going to add our like terms. We have 7 and a -3, which give me a +4, and then -2i plus 1i. So -2 plus 1 is a -1i, or just -i. All right, and then the third one, here's where things change a little bit. We no longer have a plus sign, but we have a minus. So this is where we think about that as like a -1. So we read from left to right, right? So we're going to do math the same way from left to right. So this first set of information, the first parenthesis is not going to change. It's just -10 minus 3i. But reading across, this -1 will distribute to give me -4. And then -1 times -9i makes it a +9i. Now, before I finish the problem, students sometimes will question, well, why didn't we do that on the last problem? Well, technically we could. I could put a +1 here, and I could distribute this, but multiplying something by a +1 doesn't change anything. So if you want to think about it that way, you are more than welcome to. Just know multiplying by a +1 changes nothing. But multiplying by a -1 changes the signs of what's afterwards. So I went ahead and distributed my -1. Now we can go ahead and we're just putting like terms together. So I have a -10 minus 4, which is -14. And then -3i plus 9i is a +6i. And we're done. Okay. So again, just kind of getting a little bit more practice with these. When I'm looking at this, I see parentheses, but my brain first needs to look at what sign is in between. Since it's a negative, I know I have to distribute that. Reading from left to right, there's nothing in front of this first one, so it's just -5 minus 3i. And as I keep going, this will distribute. So 2 negatives makes it a +2. -1 times 4i is -4i. Now I can put my like terms together. So I have -5 plus 2 is -3, and -3i minus 4i is -7i. Okay, looking at the next one, I see a plus sign. If you want to distribute a +1, you can go right ahead. It just doesn't change anything. So if it makes you more comfortable, we can rewrite this even without those parentheses. So if I distribute a +1, that's still a +3 and a +9i. And then I can just put my like terms together. So I have -3 plus 3, which will cancel out. And I have 9i plus 9i, which is 18i. And we're good. Okay, at this point, if I were you, I would pause this video and try these 4 problems on your own and then hit play on the video to watch me go through them. Okay, so hit pause and try these 4. All right, now that hopefully you've tried these 4 on your own, let's see how we did. So working through, again, I see a plus sign, so it's like a +1. I can just collect my like terms, no signs need to change. So I have -7 plus 6 is -1. -3i minus 9i, oops, is going to make that a -12i. Okay, the next problem, there is a negative in between. I need to distribute the -1. First problem's going to stay the same. I'm going to distribute the negative. That will make that a +4. Distribute the negative makes that a -2i. And then put my like terms together. So -5 plus 4 is -1. And -8i minus 2i gives me -10i. Okay, so you have to make sure you're being very careful and looking at what signs are in between. Okay, next problem down. Again, I could think of that as a +1. If I distribute a +1, it doesn't change anything. So I have -2 plus 2 will cancel out. And then I have a +5i plus 5i gives me a +10i. Okay, and then the last one. Again, there's a negative in between, so I will need to distribute. So I have 3 minus 4i. -1 times 5 is -5. -1 and a -10i make a +10i. And we collect like terms. So I have 3 minus 5, which is -2. -4i plus 10i is a +6i. And there we go. So that is adding and subtracting with complex numbers or with an I. Just be very careful of what symbol is in between your parentheses. I love this cartoon. Why are you turning in a blank sheet of paper? Because all my answers are imaginary numbers. You and I both know that's not actually the case. Imaginary numbers are a real thing where we actually use an I to represent them. But I just thought that was funny. Don't turn your test in blank though. I will give you a 0. All right, so the last part I want to cover, I'm sorry, the next part, not the last, the next part is multiplying complex numbers. We need to think back, hopefully you recognize when we talked about I originally in our complex numbers, that I squared equals -1. So this is something we need to have memorized, we need to know. I squared is -1. Okay, looking at the first problem, we do see a number outside of a parenthesis, we will multiply. Okay, so -2i times 5 is -10i, and then -2i times a positive I is -2i squared. Now, it is considered not simplified to leave an I squared in your problem. So once we get to this point and I see an I squared, I need to recognize that I squared is the same thing as a -1. So what we got going then is this is -2, and instead of I squared, it's being multiplied by -1. So -2 times -1 makes that a +2. So I have -10i plus 2. Notice the I disappeared on that because I replaced I squared with -1. Right? Because since they equal each other, I can literally put one in place of the other. Okay, looking at the next one, it's just 7i times 3i. Well, that would give you 21i squared. And I know I can't leave an I squared, right? We need to replace that with -1. So that's going to be multiplied by 21. And then 21 times -1 gives me a -21. So anytime you see I squared show up in a problem, we can't leave that. Replace your I squareds with -1s and then finish simplifying. All right, so let's go ahead and give some a try here. So we have 2 sets of parentheses. Notice in between, do you see there is no plus, no minus? If there is no symbol in between, then we are multiplying. So be careful. Students, the biggest mistakes they make is they multiply everything because they see parentheses. You have to make sure you're watching for that symbol in between. All right, since there's no symbol, no plus or minus in between, I know I'm multiplying, so we will distribute. So negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Negative 3 times negative 2i is a positive 6i. And then we distribute the 6i times 4 is 24i. And 6i times negative 2i is negative 12i squared. Remember, I times I is I squared. Okay, so I need to kind of clean up my answer then. So I do see some like terms in the middle. I know that those two like terms are going to give me 30i. But then I recognize that I have an I squared in my answer. So this I squared will get replaced with a negative 1. So then I have negative 12 times negative 1, which makes that a positive 12. Then I can put my like terms of 12 and negative 12 together, and those will actually just cancel out. So my answer is just 30i. Okay, let's try the next one. Again, there is no symbol in between here, so I know it is multiply. If there's a plus or a minus, I'm not going to multiply, okay? Only when there's no symbol. So we will distribute. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. 4 times negative 2i is negative 8i. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3i. And 3i times negative 2i is negative 6i squared. All right, I'm multiplying that 3 times negative 2, and then I and I make I squared. All right, collecting our like terms then. We're looking at like terms in the middle. That would give me negative 11i. And then I recognize I have an I squared, which I know gets replaced with a negative 1. And negative 6 times negative 1 makes that a positive 6. So then I can put my like terms of negative 4 plus 6, which is 2. So I have 2 minus 11i. All right, next one on here. Again, looking, there is no symbol in between, which means I'm going to multiply. So we will distribute. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3i is negative 15i. 3i times 5 is a positive 15i. And 3i times negative 3i is negative 9i squared. All right, putting our like terms together. In between here, negative 15i plus 15i actually cancel out. I recognize an I squared, which becomes negative 1. So then I have negative 9 times negative 1, which is a positive 9. And then putting my like terms, 25 plus 9 is 34. So that final answer is actually not imaginary. The I parts actually canceled out. All right, we can still get a little more practice with our multiplying, but the other part of this we need to talk about is a complex conjugate. Whew, that sounds hard. All right, again, in math, when things sound hard, they're usually not so bad. So a complex conjugate is the opposite of something, in other words. So if I look at the example up here, I have A plus BI. Its conjugate is A minus BI. The only signs that are changing is that middle sign. I didn't really change like the A, I didn't change that first number, just that sign in the middle will change to its opposite. And then that makes them complex conjugates. Because anytime you multiply those together, you end up with a real number. If we look back, the previous slide, that last problem, you actually multiplied complex conjugates together. If you look right here, this one was 5 plus 3i, 5 minus 3i. So you had complex conjugates, and look at your answer. It was a real number. It wasn't imaginary anymore. So that's what we're looking at, multiplying these together. So if I take a look, the first one, -2 minus 7i, -2 plus 7i. Again, the only signs that changed were the middle sign. Students always try to change this first number as well, especially when it's a negative to start with, but we don't change those, okay? Only that middle sign changes. So if I multiply, -2 times -2 is a +4. -2 times 7i is -14i. -7i times -2 is a +14i. And -7i times 7i is -49i squared. All right, cleaning up this then, my like terms in the middle, -14i plus 14i, will actually cancel out. I squared is going to be replaced with -1. So -49 times -1 is a +49. I will put my like terms together. 4 plus 49 is 53. All right, so anytime you're multiplying complex conjugates together, you should end up with a real answer, meaning you get an answer that does not have an I. It's not imaginary anymore. All right, so last two problems here. Again, at any point, feel free to hit pause, try it on your own, and then come back and see if you did it correctly, okay? Don't just blindly watch. Try some on your own, hit and pause, okay? And then come back and watch. So give the complex conjugate of each complex number and then multiply them together. So if I have 4 minus 6i, its conjugate is going to be something that just has that opposite middle sign. So this one would be 4 plus 6i. Okay, that makes it a complex conjugate. And then it says, and multiply. I will tell you right now on our chapter test, I have students every year who will give me the complex conjugate, and then that's it. And then they don't multiply. Okay, so make sure you're reading directions. So multiplying together, 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 6i is 24i. -6i times 4 is -24i. And -6i times +6i is a -36i squared. All right, cleaning this up, our like terms in the middle, 24i minus 24i, will cancel out. I know I squared is the same thing as -1. So -36 times -1 is +36. And then my like terms, 16 plus 36 is going to give us 52. So we end up with a real number. You should not have i's left if you're multiplying conjugates together. All right, last problem. Again, I would strongly encourage you to hit pause and try this one on your own, and then come back and watch it. Okay, so the complex conjugate of -8 plus I, again, only that middle sign should change. So it would be -8 minus I. That negative does not change in front of the 8. Okay, only the middle sign changes. All right, so there's the correct conjugate. Now we'll multiply it together. So -8 times -8 is a +64. -8 times -8i, or I'm sorry, -8 times -i is a +8i. I times -8 is -8i. And I times -i is -i squared. If it helps, remember there is a -1 in front of that, right? We always have those unspoken ones. All right, cleaning this up then, my like terms in the middle, 8i minus 8i, those will be gone. I know I squared is the same thing as -1. So -1 times -1 is a +1. And 64 plus 1 is 65. And we are done. So at any point during this video, if you were unsure, I know I moved a little quick trying to get through the video, you can always pause, you can rewind, you can rewatch, and always try things on your own as you're working through. If you have questions, let me know. All right, thanks guys.